Okay, so The Discomfort Zone by Jonathon Franzen is a 2006 memoir, and I went into it not really knowing it was a memoir, and I kind of went in with a bit of ignorance on like what point in his career that was, and now knowing that I really have only read, I believe, which I did a review of, The Corrections, and I think that was kind of the one that kind of propelled him semi into fame with Oprah's kind of being a contender for Oprah's book club, and the kind of it wasn't a huge kind of dramatic thing, but he was just like politely declining on being a part of that kind of thing because he thought that would be a little bit too open, I guess. But anyway, so Franzen's kind of comes from a little bit. It's hard to kind of differentiate what his style's kind of postmodern, but by the time he wrote the Corrections, I think he wanted to move away from that and kind of establish himself a little bit more as a more sincere, but like a more realistic, as in realism. And I'm not sure if that's kind of in the kind of same kind of realism as, say, Raymond Carver, or but I also see some similarities with the William Gaddis and like Thomas Pynchon, except Pynchon definitely takes the more, the very like hectic kind of over, like everything is super exaggerated, like the missiles and the rockets, and it's like everything. I guess there is in like Inherent Vice. Actually, I haven't read that yet, but I think there's more of a gritty kind of realism. It's almost like it's a bit of a slacker kind of at the central, this slacker noir. I think I've heard some people describe it at. The same goes for like the Big Lebowski, Coen Brothers. There are various Coen Brothers movies as well. But yeah, so Franzen and a little update. Yeah, there is some very icy weather, and I'm kind of it is still dark, even though it's like 6 in the morning right now. Yeah, almost 7, and it's like just giving a kind of a little bit of a update on like this. It is December 10th and December 8th. I'm sorry, and so it is very. It's like a foreboding kind of icy, classic Pennsylvania winter of just coming in with a torrential downpour, and now that melted away, and then it kind of came back. So it's like kind of I feel like I'm kind of ensconced inside. So I'm kind of getting a little bit more any habits of like I'm not unhygienic. I'm not like that bad, but any habits of like growing out my hair or my beard is probably going to kind of be accentuated. So just for your just FYI. So so in the Discomfort Zone, it is a memoir, so it's autobiography, and not really a Roman de Clef kind of way of kind of a partially kind of Bildungsroman some of it did seem Bildungsroman, but it's more so just concerning Franzen's recollections of his from about childhood to present day in his 40s, and he's talking about how he's hailing from, I think he's born to New York, but he hails from the Midwest. Kind of had a little bit of a tumultuous kind of academic background from an early age. A little bit similar to David Foster Wallace, who they were friends at some point in their career. I don't know how close they were, but I do know at some point, maybe from the late 90s to David Foster Wallace's death, I think they were in some way acquainted. I'm not too sure how close. But yeah, so they basically have a similar kind of thing of like being born in one area and kind of being brought around kind of from one side. Like Dave Eggers, I think, talked about that kind of paradigm, that kind of interesting phenomenon of being kind of drug around. Not to necessarily say any ill will or against any parents who kind of do that, because like it could just be like this restless kind of thing could just be for work purposes, and maybe sometimes it's army brats who kind of move around a lot, so on military bases and stuff. But I think in this case it was his he did have some loved ones and like some parents in like the Midwest, and I believe with Franzen he was talking about how the Charlie Brown Peanuts like that, and by Charles M. Schulz was basically how he kind of stumbled upon that and kind of introduced him to this kind of almost pessimistic but not without any warrant. Like, Schultz was depressive, and he struggled with that kind of, I don't know if it was manic depressive, but he did struggle with that kind of outlook, because he couldn't help it, but he did struggle with that kind of depression throughout his life, and it was in varying degrees, and he did, I think, serve, Franzen gives like a quick biopic, and by the way, he does kind of jump around a lot, so it's kind of hard to keep track of like a chronology distinctly, because it is, Franzen might go back to like, his childhood days, and then he'll like randomly, but not without reason, I'm sure, insert some like a biopic of like, the Peanuts, or then he'll like talk about maybe German writers, because he spent a semester or two, I think, in Germany on it might have been more than that. He could have been, I think, a year in Germany, and then where he basically studied and tried to learn the language and like kind of understand the culture. And he was taking, I believe, creative writing at Swarthmore, but they sent him off, I think, for a not internship, study abroad kind of thing in Germany. So that's where he kind of like had more of an impactful kind of what the word is. There was a lot of like, this is why it's kind of Bildungsroman in a sense, because it's like he's developing his personality, and it's like he's kind of making sense of all these things, and yeah, and he does it without losing your attention. Like, he's it's not too long of a read, I don't think, but yeah, he's going from his kind of criticism to like the Bush administration at the time, to like the difficulty of travel, to like maybe buying a house, and and all these different things that are that you would imagine maybe more so as like the average working class citizen might have a trouble with. But he's like talking about how he he's like, despite having some luck with those things, like he's not immune from all these mundanities that everybody else goes through in life, and that certain things like the existential question of marriage, and like wanting marriage to have kids, and then how I think he's talked about how his first marriage kind of, I don't want to use the word like was a disaster, was fell apart, but it did kind of slowly the faded out because of how just the different outlooks they both had, and kind of like his wife at the time, I think, wanted something, didn't want kids, and he wanted kids, so it's like just simple disagreements that seem to but at the same time I did like his, when he talked about the Peanuts thing, and how that kind of got him into writing, and initially because he was talking about how he was drug away on these church camp excursions, and because he was a part of a very, not a Catholic, but it was like pretty strict Protestant kind of family, and he was like made to partake in many different activities, like church-related stuff, and like youth groups and stuff like that, which I can relate to, being a part of a youth group at some point in my youth as well, from about the ages of like 12 to 16, 17, I think, and all the ups and downs, like all the the stuff like about how being a teenage boy is like very, very difficult, is like a very simple way, understated, but yeah, it is how confounding and how perplexing all of adolescence is for anybody, but particularly for teenage boys. So that's why I kind of related to that on just a personal, kind of almost existential level, of biological level, I guess. But I did, and more so on the kind of like epistemological kind of level of that, of being kind of forced to kind of not necessarily forced, but having parents, like for example his mother, that he kind of had plenty of disagreements throughout his life, and how his mother wanted him to be, like a kind of bright shining example of a Christian boy, and how he kind of fell away from that image too, and like almost purposely did to kind of, and then ended up breaking her heart, and then she kind of, but then he was like with his mother when she passed away. I think she said that I think his father said he had Parkinson's, so that's another thing where that I saw in the corrections, where I saw that parallel from the father in the corrections, reminded me a lot, or he definitely drew a lot of that kind of personal experience of losing a loved one and the trauma that entails. And yeah, so I did find a lot that I liked about this little memoir. Yeah, it's definitely going to inspire me to read more of Franzen, and there's one more thing I want to discuss about it, when he was talking about like Rainer Maria Rilke, he was one of my favorite poets as well, and he was talking about how studying him and then his own understanding of Kafka too, how he went from reading the trial in like his German studies overseas, and he was talking about how reading that at first he was like admitting that he didn't quite understand it. Like he took it at like K was, Joseph K was basically inserted as being guilty. I think that's the way he said. He was like, well, what if K's not guilty? Franzen said at the time, as a kind of not quite fully initiated with Kafka. And then he's like arguing, kind of the defendant, kind of a devil's advocate, kind of classic example. And he's saying, what if he's not? And then his teacher says that, well, you probably want to read that again. So he goes back and then hoards over the details, like talks about every last, like he goes to certain scenes where, excuse me, I set an alarm just to make sure I'm not going too much over the limit. But anyway, so yeah, see how organic that was? Anyway, but so, and just trying to be distracting me. But yeah, so he's talking about how Joseph K. actually appeared to be more unnerving, more almost abjectly, a little bit predatory, I think. And that made me realize too, because I read the trial, Joseph K., kind of reading him as almost like this poor guy that's kind of thrown in the middle of it, in a way he is. And then, but at the same time, there are things that almost kind of morally just out, reprehensible things. He talks about like Frau, the character of Frau, which I think is just German for Madame Fraulein, I think, Berstner, I think her name was. And she was one of the, I think, tenants in the Joseph K.'s apartment building who is kind of adjacent, and how he kind of ingratiated himself into her home and kind of under the pretense of basically sleeping with her, and then she rejects him, but then he eventually kind of forces himself, as if I'm not mistaken. And the way it's cold is, it's of course, Kafka's very clinical in the way he says these things, and he's like, one of the things Franzen has a problem with was his use of lack of paragraph breaks, and like not using punctuation in a classic kind of the way that you'd expect, even through all the kind of proper kind of Max Broad's kind of executions and every other translator's kind of the way they handle the text. But I think with I like the fact that he was like, the way now it came off as more of a very, very like you see a kind of a self-image of every guilty person that is guilty by their own right. And you see the two sides of the thing with the Kafkaesque hero, which is a classic kind of thing with K as well, because K, as in the castle, also has kind of a weird falling outs and kind of a thing with Frida, the barmaid, I think her name. The way they kind of interact was kind of strange too. I sense that without kind of repeating himself, Kafka is also maybe exploring the same kind of topic of a hero. In anti-heroes, kind of maybe too cheap. But a hero, the protagonist is like somebody who is guilty by their own kind of natural nature, and like they have their, maybe they don't have any other choice. Maybe if you're talking about kind of free will and kind of being autonomy and being thrust into this kind of world, but at the same time, I think Franzen said that basically that hero is like, he wasn't a hero at all, and this kind of inversely kind of brought a different kind of picture, shown a different kind of like negative kind of picture on it, like a more kind of harsher, like he deserved his like, even though it was so horrible the way he gets stabbed arbitrarily by these two men and out of nowhere. And yeah, so I just want to kind of make that a little bit clear. So anyway, that's all I have for Jonathon Franzen's The Discomfort Zone, and thanks for watching.